running more material. So we got more organics coming through.
Exactly right. Nope, they're doing their job, bud.
Yeah, good job, Gretel. We did okay.
We did all right.
The Yukon is breaking miners this season. Machines lie dead in the mud, pumps choke on silt, and millions of dollars vanish by the day. But when everyone else saw failure, two men, Freddie Dodge and Juan Ibarra, saw a rescue mission. What they found buried in barrels behind a gold room would turn disaster into a $100 million miracle. Stay locked in, and if you want us to keep uncovering these hidden gold secrets, smash that like button and subscribe right now. Freddie and Juan arrive at a mine already on its knees. The pit is half flooded, engines cracked wide open from relentless strain, sluice boxes warped beyond repair. Crews work for pennies as ounces dry up. Investors hover like vultures, and the first snow dusts the Yukon ridges. A reminder that time is almost gone. Gold recovery, flatlined. What little they wash out is nothing but fine dust. So thin and powdery, most miners call it garbage. Watching payroll drain and iron rust in silence, Freddie narrows his eyes at the wreck. This mine isn't broke, he mutters, boots sinking into mud. It's buried. And I've dug bodies out of worse. Behind the gold room, forgotten and dismissed, Juan notices something others have ignored. Row after row of rusting barrels filled with nearly 2,000 tons of leftover tailings, ultra-fine dust, too light for the old sluices to catch, left behind as worthless sludge. Historically, Klondike miners spat at this stuff, fool's dust they called it, chasing nuggets instead of smoke. But Juan, sharp-eyed and practical, crouches beside a barrel and lets the powder sift through his gloves. To him, this isn't waste. It's a riddle waiting for the right machine. He pulls Freddie over, explaining that with modern concentrators, there's a real chance the dust still holds trapped fortune. Locals scoff, shaking their heads. Nobody's ever turned leftovers into millions. But Freddie squares his shoulders and tells them straight, if anyone's going to rescue a fortune from dust, it's us. Samples are sent out, and when the numbers come back, the mine office erupts in disbelief. 2.5 ounces per ton, on a scale of thousands of tons. Freddie throws the figures on a whiteboard. When scaled up, that's over $100 million locked in barrels the miners had written off as trash. For a crew barely holding on, it's the kind of number that stops the heart. Freddie points at the board, steady voice cutting through the chaos. This isn't waste. This is a second mine hiding in plain sight. Investors who had been ready to abandon ship lean forward, suddenly attentive, but they want proof. Machines, recovery, bars in hand before a dime goes further. Outside Dawson, rumors flare like wildfire. Men whisper that Freddie and Juan have found a way to conjure gold from air, a trick too good to be real. Some call it genius, others call it desperation, dressed as alchemy. Phones buzz across the Yukon. Miners, bankers, rivals all waiting to see if the numbers can be turned into bars. Even Parker Schnabel calls, voice half mocking, half wary. Show me the proof. And that's exactly what Freddie sets out to deliver. Within weeks, a flatbed truck grinds into camp under heavy tarps and chains, carrying something that looks more like a weapon than a mining tool. Freddie had called in favors, stretching from Denver to Frankfurt. And now, a German-built centrifugal separator sat gleaming in the Yukon sun, its drum capable of reaching 12,000 revolutions per minute. Fast enough to rip micron-sized gold particles from their prison of clay. But raw hardware wasn't enough. Juan bent sparks into the night, welding together a Frankenstein of recovery gear, hydrocyclones to strip waterborne mud, shaking tables to tease out heavies, and electrostatic plates to trap particles invisible to the naked eye. It wasn't pretty. It looked like a machine stitched out of nightmares. But if it held together, it could change the economics of gold forever. Rival trucks slowed whenever they passed, their drivers staring at the strange machinery rising out of Freddy's camp. Whispers spread across Dawson. The Dodge Ibarra outfit wasn't mining anymore. They were building something new. Tony Beats, leaning against his own D10 dozer, laughed with a voice loud enough for his whole crew to hear. "Dust don't pay the bills, boys. Rocks make gold, not powder." His words carried across the valley, bitter and mocking. Freddy, covered in welding grit, didn't look up from his work. "Rocks built the Klondike," he shot back without raising his voice. "Dust will build its future." Tony's scorn didn't hide his unease. By nightfall, his son Kevin was dispatched under the pretense of scouting new ground. But everyone in Dawson knew the truth. Kevin was a shadow, circling Freddy's claim, trying to glimpse the new system. He wasn't alone. Parker Schnabel had sent in a geologist, slipping through the bars and poker tables of Dawson, asking quiet questions, taking quiet notes. Every rival knew if Freddy cracked this code, tailings piles across the Yukon would become open gold vaults. Nobody wanted to be left behind. The tension seeped into town. In Dawson's bars, whiskey-glazed arguments flared into fists. Miners screamed at each other, some swearing Freddy was a genius about to birth a revolution, others calling it snake oil, a shiny toy doomed to eat itself alive. One fight left a window shattered and a man bleeding into the snow. The Klondike hadn't seen this kind of fever since the first stampede in 1896. The Yukon Mining Board stepped in, their warning blunt. Machines that spin at 12,000 RPM don't just fail, they explode. In the last decade, 3 men had been killed, standing too close when bearings failed and steel drums turned into shrapnel. Freddy listened, nodded, and kept signing the delivery slips. They called it reckless. He called it necessary. Juan, when pressed by reporters about the danger, just shrugged. "If we don't take risks," he said, voice even, "the Klondike dies in the dust." Finally, the day came. The centrifuge was bolted down, its frame humming with anticipation. Fuel pumps whined, generators groaned, and then the drums screamed to life, shaking the ground like an earthquake rolling under the permafrost. Crew members held their breath as slurry poured in by the ton. For hours, the only product was muddy water, brown sludge spilling uselessly into troughs. Men began to mutter that it was a waste, a con, the latest in a long line of doomed rescues. The longer it ran, the heavier the silence grew, broken only by the banshee wail of the machine. Juan paced beside the filters, eyes locked on the outflow. Nothing, nothing, more nothing. Crew morale broke, the same way sluice boxes had broken weeks before. It looked like the critics were right. Freddy's gamble was bleeding diesel and dollars into the Yukon dirt. Hands went for the kill switch. Then Juan shouted. He pointed to the filter trays, to where light shimmered unnaturally under the mud. When the crew scraped it clear, they froze, a glittering streak, fine as dust, but gold as sunrise. Pure micron particles, trapped and shining, the kind nobody in Dawson thought could ever be captured. Freddy lifted a vial to the light, hands shaking, and whispered what every man was too stunned to say. "We just turned dirt into fortune." That first cleanup was small by Klondike standards, $50,000, rescued entirely from dust. No nuggets, no pickers, just powder transmuted into profit. Yet it was more than a payday. It was proof the impossible could be done. And proof, in mining, spreads like fire. Within days, that modest vial gave way to barrels, and barrels to fortunes. The $50,000 cleanup multiplied like wildfire. 2 million, then 5, then 12 million in a single week, all pulled from dust once written off as garbage. Every run of the centrifuge produced more concentrate than the last, and Juan's ingenuity transformed chaos into perfection. He designed a new smelting process tailored for dust, fusing the microscopic particles into seamless bars. Buyers who examined the ingots were left speechless, flawless, without the slag or impurities of ordinary pores. The name trash gold was already being erased from Dawson's vocabulary. When Freddie commissioned a special 100-ounce bar, cast entirely from rescued dust, and carried it through town in a glass case, even his worst critics fell silent. Old miners who had spent lifetimes chasing chunky nuggets wiped tears from their eyes, realizing they had thrown away fortunes without knowing it. In the gold room, hardened crew members broke down as they saw debts erased and families secured. Freddie set the record straight, in words no one could ignore. This isn't a rescue, it's a revolution. But revolutions don't come without enemies. Across the valley, Tony Beats scrambled in a panic, sending his crews to reprocess old tailings, throwing every sluice and jig at the waste piles. The results were pitiful. Without Juan's precision system, Tony's operations produced nothing but mud and disappointment. Parker Schnabel, recognizing the scale of what was unfolding, offered Juan $20 million for the exclusive rights to the system. Juan turned him down flat. He hadn't built this out of greed. He had built it to prove that what everyone called worthless still carried value. The rejection sent shockwaves across the industry. Meanwhile, smaller miners were collapsing. Equipment hit the pawn shops of Dawson in a flood. Wash plants, pumps, trucks sold for pennies on the dollar as men gave up hope of competing in a dust economy they couldn't touch. Freddie's empire only expanded as desperate operators offered him contracts, begging him to reprocess their tailings. From the Klondike River to the Indian River, Freddie's crews set up satellite systems, hauling in dust by the truckload, each pile turning into another bar. For the first time, the Klondike had a new king, and it wasn't Parker, it wasn't Tony, it wasn't Discovery's cameras. It was Freddie Dodge, the man who could pull millions out of what everyone else had thrown away. News of the miracle couldn't be contained within Yukon borders. Headlines splashed across the world. Klondike dust converts to $100 million in gold. The numbers sounded like fantasy, but they were real, backed by banks, buyers, and bars glittering in glass cases. Almost overnight, gold futures spiked violently as traders realized waste piles across every mining district on Earth might hold fortunes. Billions in untapped reserves suddenly became possible. Corporations scrambled to reach Freddie, offering joint ventures worth more money than any prospector could imagine. Some dangled billion-dollar checks in front of him, desperate to license the method. Governments panicked. If dust really was this valuable, entire national reserves could be rewritten. Supply forecasts, stable for decades, were suddenly worthless. Wall Street analysts issued grim warnings. The dust era may reshape the economy of gold. This is the beginning of a mining arms race. The Yukon had seen stampedes before, but nothing like this. Rivalries were crushed, markets buckled, and in the eye of the storm stood Freddie and Juan, watching the world discover what they already knew, that every speck of dust could change history. But while the world counted dollars, the Klondike itself was tallying a different kind of debt. As the centrifuges roared day and night, The runoff tanks began to overflow. Chemical solutions designed to bind with microscopic particles slipped through filters and leaked into the creeks. At first, it was subtle, a strange metallic sheen on the water. Salmon carcasses floating belly up in pools where they had spawned for centuries. Then, the calls started. Environmental groups descending on Dawson with cameras and bullhorns, demanding answers. Indigenous leaders warned that the land could not take this kind of assault. "The salmon are our history," one elder said, his voice carrying across a town hall packed with miners and politicians. "You poison them, you poison us." The words hit like a hammer. Freddie had built his career on fixing broken systems, not breaking the land itself. Yet now his greatest triumph risked being remembered as destruction. The hammer came down harder when a courier delivered a thick packet of papers straight to Freddie's office. Injunction. If the lawsuits held up in court, every centrifuge, every smelter, every barrel of dust would be shut down overnight. Investors read the news before Freddie could call them, phones buzzing with panic. Some demanded cleaner methods immediately, threatening to pull out. Others hinted at selling their shares to rivals who would scoop the technology for pennies if Freddie stumbled. The gold was real, but so was the danger, financial and environmental. Freddie rubbed his forehead with both hands, and Juan, ever blunt, dropped his welding gloves on the table. "We dug out the gold," he muttered, "but now the dirt is digging back." Yet even under fire, the scale of what they had achieved could not be denied. A Dawson museum formally requested Freddie's very first dust bar, the symbolic slab that proved waste could be turned into wealth. It would sit under glass beside pickaxes from the 1896 stampede, a permanent reminder that history had not ended with Carmack's discovery. It had only been waiting for the right tools. Historians penned articles comparing Freddie's rescue to the birth of the Klondike Rush itself, calling it a second golden age. At a private gathering, Freddie stood over the glass case and whispered, "I've spent my life chasing ounces. This time, the ounces chased me." Crew families filled the hall for the celebration, children running their fingers along the edges of bars cast from what had once been dismissed as garbage. Men who had nearly lost everything lifted glasses in silent gratitude. When Mining Weekly released its annual awards, the headline crowned them both: Freddie Dodge and Juan Ibarra, saviors of the Klondike. But history doesn't freeze, even in the Yukon winter. Freddie unveiled plans to export his dust recovery systems abroad. South America, where vast tailings dams held billions in untapped waste. Africa, where artisanal miners left behind mountains of fine concentrates. The world's forgotten dirt was suddenly a marketplace, and Freddie's machines were the keys to online forums lit up with conspiracy theories, claiming the rescue was too good to be true. Some insisted Freddie's system was secretly funded by governments to manipulate gold markets. Others claimed the bars were fakes, tungsten cores plated in gold. Videos dissected blurry images of centrifuges, overlaying them with wild speculation about CIA projects or alien technology. Freddie ignored it, but Juan sometimes scrolled late into the night, shaking his head at how quickly victory could turn into myth. And then, as the season wound down, the Yukon reminded them who was still in charge. Snow fell heavy, blanketing the tailings piles in white silence. Centrifuges were drained, fires stoked in cabins, and crews prepared to retreat until spring. Freddie stood at the edge of the frozen claim, breath steaming in the twilight. His eyes traced the barrels, the machines, the bars, locked away in vaults. For a moment, He thought of the land, how every scoop of dirt carried both promise and price. He knelt, sifted a handful of frozen soil through his gloves, and whispered to no one but the cold, "Every grain of dirt has a story. And now, every grain has a price."